The Ruger LCP or the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 2.0. Let's check it out. Guys, Smith & Wesson just introduced their Bodyguard 2.0. It's tiny. It's a 380 ACP, has 10 to 12 rounds. It is just something that you can deep conceal. Very discreet carry. But my deep concealed carry gun has been the Ruger LCP Max. This is a great little gun, 10 to 12 rounds. They're roughly the same size, but there are some pretty significant differences between the two. Now, a lot of people have been asking about a comparison between these two handguns. A lot of questions. Really, because the Ruger LCP has been one of those guns that I have relied on quite a bit. And now, honestly, I'm very excited about the Smith & Wesson. I want to take a more in-depth look in these two handguns. And guys, if you're looking for something in 380 ACP, which gives you low recoil, and something that gives you a very tiny self-defense option, I think either one of these are going to be great, but we're going to look at the pros and cons of both. Now, I want to give a big thank you to Smith & Wesson for sending the Bodyguard 2.0, but also a big thank you to Ruger for sending the LCP Max. This is going to be just an honest, straight-up comparison, and we're just going to see which one is better for you. And in full disclosure, both Ruger and Smith & Wesson sent these guns for me to keep. Well guys, 380 ACP has made a comeback. We did a video just recently on the number of different handguns that have been just released with the past couple of years. But this is one category with 380 ACP that I'm particularly fond of. Now with the Ruger LCP Max, I mean, I carried the standard LCP, and then here we have the LCP2. 6-round mag capacity. I mean, this was great because it was so tiny, but it was really limited. When we get to the new models, the Ruger LCP Max, 10+1, and they also offer a 12+1 magazine. When it comes to the new Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 2.0, we're going with 10 rounds. It's very small. These are two very comparable handguns. Now, what really led me to this was more of a personal note, because I have been carrying the Ruger LCP Max ever since it was introduced. It is my deep carry option. And to be honest, it's one of those guns that I've been very pleased with. I do carry this actually on a fairly regular basis because it is so easy to conceal. But once the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 2.0 came out, I've really taken a second look at what I'm going to be carrying. I'll tell you up front, my wife, as soon as she saw this, she wanted one. My daughter wanted one. We had a prepper meeting the other night, and 2 of the wives said they're definitely getting them. So there is a big appeal for this. But there's a lot of guys that have these as well, and this is also an excellent option. So we're going to look. There are some pros and there are some cons of both. But one of the things that's not a con is that these are tiny, they are reliable, and they're very concealable. So first off, let's go ahead and check to make sure the gun's unloaded. We're going to drop our 10-round magazine. Open the barrel, it's empty. Here with the Smith, same thing, 10-round magazine, and the chamber's empty. Now, one of the big things about these handguns is they both have 10-round mag capacity. They both have additional 12-round magazines. You can get it at the Ruger shop, or it comes with the Bodyguard 2.0. which is a plus. So you're getting 2 magazines with the Smith, you're getting 1 magazine with the Ruger. And I think the additional Ruger magazine runs about 42 bucks. That is from the Ruger shop. You can typically get those for less. The Ruger right now is going to be just easier to come by because it's been around for a while. The Smith & Wesson 2.0 at this time is going to be difficult because these have just been released. So let's get into some details. First off, we're going to check the size. We're going to see where we are. Pretty much as far as from top to bottom, these are the same exact height. One difference you'll see is that the slide on the Bodyguard comes out about a ½ inch. So you have a little bit more length. As far as the thinness, they are both super thin. And it's one thing I love about it. I think that the Ruger is actually just a touch thinner, but not by much. Another thing is the serrations on the slide with the Ruger LCP Max. Spaced out, they're easy to get to, no problem. You can do press checks on the front. Here with the Smith & Wesson, a little more aggressive serrations, and they're directional. I like the serrations better. They're just better, they're easier to grab, and they go up on the slide. But with the Ruger, you have this cocking ledge. So if you have, and of course this is very small, so it gives you a little bit of advantage to be able to bring that back. Secondly, this is easier to rack. When it comes to the Smith, it's not difficult to rack, but the Ruger gives you just a little less weight in racking that slide. We have a glass nylon filled polymer type material. It's a very smooth, very well done finish, and this is typical for your Ruger handguns. And the texturing is in panels on the back, the front, and on the sides. It's fairly aggressive, but there's a lot of smooth area up here. With the Smith & Wesson, it's more aggressive texturing. Now, not necessarily on the side, even though this is textured, but it rides up higher toward the web of your hand than the Ruger. Now, as far as direct texturing, I think the Smith & Wesson has it beat, but not by a whole lot. Your mag releases, I mean, fairly easy to get to. They are switchable to the other side. And I think the mag release on the Ruger is a lot lower into the frame, whereas the Smith & Wesson, it rides up to the grip, but it's a little bit more extended toward the trigger guard. Both have blade safety triggers. I believe on the Ruger you cannot get a external safety, but on the Smith & Wesson they do offer a frame safety option if you want to go that way. Personally, I like no frame safety. We have our slide stop here, we have our takedown lever. Here on the Ruger, we have our slide stop and we have a takedown lever. And we're going to talk about that when we break it down because you actually need a little bullet case or a small screwdriver to disassemble, and this pin comes out. Another thing is the Armor Night finish on the Smith & Wesson. It is very well done. It's a black nitride finish, stainless steel slide with a stainless steel barrel. With the Ruger, we have just a steel alloy slide. And it has kind of a, really it looks like a tumbled kind of effect on it. It holds up well, but as far as the appeal, I think that the Smith & Wesson has a better looking slide. But honestly, this has been a great little gun, and even carrying it all day long doesn't seem to have any kind of problems with rust or corrosion or anything. Sights, a big deal. Two blacked out rear sights. The Smith & Wesson has a little bit more of a wider notch, and we have serrations on both. Front sights, we have an orange dot with the Smith. We have a tritium sight at the front on the LCP. I think that gives it a win. They are dovetailed in, so these can be changed out, and you can change these sights out even on the Smith & Wesson. Plus, both have cocking shelves on the rear sight. That's a big advantage as well for one-handed reloads. Trigger guard in the Ruger is a little bit larger. With the Smith & Wesson, it's ample. It's big. In fact, it's just as big of an area up front. It definitely hangs down a little bit with the LCP. One of the things, and this is a big one to me, with the Ruger, we have our frame coming up, and so if you have really large hands, the frame does kind of hang down here, so it gives you a little bit of distance between the slide and the web of your hand, which if you have, again, big hands, you could really get slide bite with some of these smaller pistols. This just gives you some extra protection. With the Smith & Wesson, it comes up with a beaver tail and it gets it really high. Now this rides over the web of your hand, so it can give you some protection in that area. But if you have really big meaty hands, you could possibly have some issues with a little bit of slide bite. With that being said, this high angle allows you to get your hand way up next to the slide. And so it gives you a very low bore axis, and honestly it makes it shoot really well. It gives you a lot of control. Again, with the Ruger, while it gets it up there, you have quite a bit of distance between the web of your hand and the slide. And so that can be an advantage and a disadvantage. It's going to give you a little more lower slide riding on the web, which gives you a little bit more recoil management to really being able to protect your hand if you have larger hands. Another thing about the grip, you'll notice on the Ruger it has a very short front strap, and that has to do a lot with this large trigger guard. With the Smith, we have a considerable amount of difference with that front strap. It's going to give you a better grip on the handgun. And again, there's not any difference in height. So I think Smith & Wesson did really well by getting this grip as large as they could get it, getting your hand up as high as it can, and giving you that low bore axis, and it just allows for better shootability. We're still going to take these to the range. Of course, I've shot both extensively, but we're going to compare them side by side, and so we'll probably have some ideas about the recoil management and if this even affects it at all. Now, neither one has accessory rails, and neither one is optics ready. Now, another big difference between the two is with the Ruger, we have an internal hammer. And so you'll notice that right here in that slot in the rear of the slide, when we pull the trigger, you can see the hammer. It has the tone of C, which is very unusual, but I noticed that during the first review. Now, with the Smith & Wesson, we have a striker fire. And so with this, you know, it's just an internal, straight out trigger pull. Actually, because this is pre-cocked with a hammer back, there's not a whole lot of difference, but let's look at a little more detail. Here with the Ruger, we have our standard safety on the trigger. This is just going to keep it blocked from inadvertently pulling it. Here, depress it. We have take up right to here. We hit a wall. Have some resistance. And then we have the brake. There is quite a bit of stacking right before you get to it, but it's mainly just resistance. And then reset right about there. We have a trigger blade safety as well on the Smith. Here, it's a shorter take up and not a bad brake. It is a little mushy, but not too bad, but it's pretty quick after you hit the wall. Reset right about there. Trigger pull weight with our Lyman trigger gauge. 3 pounds, 11.8 ounces. The Bodyguard 2.0. 3 pounds, 1.1 ounces. Pretty lightweight, very smooth. Now, while you don't get an extra magazine with the Ruger, you do get this holster, and it's a branded holster. I'm sure it's a sticky holster. And this comes with the pistol, and I use this all the time. It just goes great in your pocket. It goes even good between a belt and your pants. I mean, it really rides well. It stays in place. That is a nice advantage. Is it a $42 advantage? No, between the two magazines. But I really like that Ruger threw the holster in there and included it. All right, we're going to weigh these loaded. I think that's really one of the best ways to know, especially if you're carrying this. The Ruger LCP, 13.5 ounces. That's 10 plus 1. And then the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 2.0, 14.18. There's about a ½ ounce difference. It's a little bit different on the Smith & Wesson website. I think they come in saying this weighs less than what my scale's reading, but about a ½ ounce difference. Big thank you to Fiocchi for sponsoring our ammo, all made in the USA, one of the biggest suppliers of ammunition in the country. One of the things about 380 is it is a little more expensive than 9mm, but typically with these small pistols, you're not shooting hundreds of rounds through them, but you do need to train. Also, I would highly suggest having a Lula loader, especially for the Smith & Wesson mag. It is a little tough to load when you get up to that last couple of rounds. We want to give you just an idea, hands-on, while we're at the range, some of the differences side by side. We're going to start out with the Ruger. Now again, with the Ruger, you don't quite have as low a bore axis, but you do have some protection if you have those larger hands. I mean, it definitely gives you that. But a shorter grip. One thing I have noticed is that with the recoil system, it is a little snappier. So we're going to shoot about 5 rounds, and then we're going to shoot the Smith about 5 rounds, just to get a first-hand experience. A little bit into hand, but I mean, it's not that bad to shoot. And really the muzzle flip is not bad as well. I mean, with the original LCP, it was really hard to shoot. That little bit of a width of the grip makes a huge difference. So if you're carrying an LCP, I would highly recommend checking out the Max. It is a big difference. Sights are great, and I really like that front sight, the night sight. When it comes to the Smith Bodyguard 2.0, like the longer grip. One thing, typically you'll have to really give it a little bit of a bump on the magazine to let it seat correctly. Really like the serrations on the Bodyguard, really over the Ruger. But again, there are some advantages with that Ruger slide. I'll just be straight up. Less felt recoil in the hand. There's not a lot of muzzle rise with either one of them. I think with that little shorter, smaller springs for the LCP Max, this definitely takes advantage of that with that more robust recoil system. Does add a little bit to the slide pulling it back, but really not a whole lot. And then with the Ruger, just we're going to shoot 5 rounds fast. And now with the Smith. Seem to be very reliable. They're just working well. And I'll tell you guys, really the Smith gives me a little bit of a softer feel. It's got that longer grip, and it gets my hand way up near the slide for that low bore axis. But the Ruger, I mean, I've had this for a long time. We've shot it a lot. It does help protect larger hands. Recoil is still not bad, and this is very reliable. I'm telling you guys, just 2 great choices, but there are some differences. Now for disassembly, we're going to drop our magazine. Of course, we're going to check to make sure the gun's unloaded. First thing we want to do is bring back your slide into slide lock. Now it does require something to get in behind the takedown pin. You may be able to do it with your fingernail, but typically I'll take a small screwdriver or a case head and an empty shell. And then we just pull out our takedown pin. And it does separate from the pistol. And then release your slide stop and it comes right off. Recoil spring and guide rod. It is tiny. There are 2 double coiled springs in here, but again, it's really small. Then with our barrel, we're going to pull it out. You can see the barrel is 2.8 inches in length. On the Smith, it's 2.75 inches. There's very little difference. But pretty much, this one's dirty. I'm glad I did this because I need to clean it. And then with the frame, we have frame rails that go all the way down. I like that extra frame rail. But pretty much a very simple design. Here you can see the hammer. When it comes to the Smith & Wesson, we're going to drop our mag, of course check to make sure the gun's unloaded. First thing, bring it back into slide lock, take your lever, bring it down, release your slide lock, and you have to pull the trigger, and then it comes right off. Here, a much substantial guide rod and spring. It's captive, it's dual. This is a solid guide rod system. And then we have our barrel, and you know, kind of similar to the Ruger barrel, a little bit different lockup, but really pretty much the same size. Slide is your standard striker fire pistol. Got your striker here with the striker safety. Very well done. And then here, we do have slide rails that aren't quite as extensive as on the Ruger, but they're still fairly wide and long. And so that gives you a slide to frame fit. I think you may find it a little better on the Ruger, but just to give you an idea of the 2 differences. So guys, a lot of similarities, some differences. I think one of the biggest takeaways here is the recoil system on the Smith seems to be far superior to the Ruger recoil system. This works. I've shot hundreds of rounds through the LCP Max. And with the LCP, it's the same thing. So this is what it is, but I really like the Smith a little better. And I think that's going to give you better recoil management. And for reassembly, we're just going to drop in our barrel, put in our recoil spring and guide rod, and then bring it right back over the slide. Now you want to make sure your barrel drops down, and you're going to put it in the slide lock. And then take your pin, your takedown pin, get it back in there. There's a little spring that blocks it at first. Release it. When it comes to the Smith, same thing. Drop in our barrel, put in our recoil spring and guide rod, and then put it back over your slide. Go into slide lock, bring your lever back up, bring it down, and we're back in business there. So very simple, easy to do. The other thing that I'm not very fond of with the Ruger is having to pull this pin out and that it's not retained in the frame. But overall, very easy to maintain. Now guys, especially with these small pocket pistols, it's vital that you keep them clean. Any of you carry firearms. I mean, lint and dust and different things get in these. And so make sure you keep them managed. And we really appreciate Otis Technologies as one of our sponsors. And having your guns cleaned is important. They are the official supplier of cleaning equipment for the U.S. military. They're also the inventors of the ripcord, which is the bore snake, and they have the little pods that are the tactical cleaning kits. So a big thanks to Otis. They have a lot of great items to keep your gun running top notch. All right, manufacturer suggested retail price. On the Ruger, it's $479. On the Smith & Wesson, it's $449. I'll be honest, I was a little surprised. I thought the Ruger would come in less expensive. But market price can be less, and a lot of times there are bigger discounts from different manufacturers. So since the Bodyguard 2.0 has just been released, we don't really know where that's going to fall. But these should be running close to the same price. So what are pros and cons? They're very tiny handguns. One of the biggest pluses for these guns. Easy to conceal, very discreet. You can really fit a lot of different lifestyles. Also 10+1, 10+1, and 12+1 that comes with the Smith, which is a big plus. 12+1 you buy separately. So that is a little bit of a ding for the Ruger. But a plus for the Ruger is it does come with its own holster. So right out of the box, you're ready to go, and these are great little holsters. Sights on the Ruger, I give it a plus. The tritium bead at the front, it just gives it some advantages, and probably what the price difference is between the two. With the Smith, we just have an orange dot at the front. It's easy to see, it's a great sight, and you can change that out for a night sight if you'd like. But this does give it the advantage to Ruger with the night sight. Texturing on the grips, I like the Smith & Wesson a little better. It's a little more aggressive from top to bottom. The grip on the Smith & Wesson, a lot more room on the back, as we can see, and you can get that hand high up for a very low bore axis. With the Ruger, you can see it's more of a higher bore axis, but if you have larger hands, this may be a better option because you have less chance of slide bite. Also, there's more grip on the front than it is with the Ruger. The trigger guard really comes down and it gives you a very short grip here. So advantage, disadvantage on both. Triggers, different system. We have a pre-cocked hammer-fired trigger, not a bad trigger, a little more stacking when you come up to the break. With the Smith, I mean, it's definitely your striker fire polymer frame trigger. Plus we have a little bit of weight savings, about a ½ ounce difference with the Ruger. As far as the finish on the slide, number one, it's stainless steel, the barrel too, and I really like that Armonite finish. But with the Ruger, it has that black oxide finish, which is kind of like almost a stone wash finish. Slide serrations are weaker on the Ruger, but it does have this cocking shelf, and it's easier to rack the slide. On the Smith & Wesson, very nice and deep serrations. I think it has to do though with the racking of having a robust recoil system and guide rod, which I think is a plus. So definitely, guys, a lot of differences. It's not a diss of one or the other, and honestly there's some big advantages with the Rugers. But it does give us a really cool option to be able to carry something very small, very discreet. Yes, 380 ACP, you know, it's not 9mm, it's not the best self-defense round, but it is an adequate self-defense round. And shot placement can be a little easier with the lighter recoil of these two little handguns. And really, to me, one of the biggest advantages is that I may have a gun a little bit larger that I feel uncomfortable carrying, whereas with this, I'll carry it. And that's really a big takeaway. Now, a couple of honorable mentions I'm going to throw in here. SIG, this is the P365 380, has one of the Wilson combat grips on it. small. In fact, it's pretty small compared to this, just a little bit larger, but it's a lot thicker. It's a bigger gun, but still very carryable. And then we have the Glock Model 42. This has a 1 extra round extension, so we have 7 rounds. Here we've got 10 rounds, and it's a much smaller handgun. I really like the Glock 42, but you know, it's very limited. So this gives you a much smaller size. These are honestly not in the same class as these two. So guys, if you're looking for something really tiny, something in 380 ACP that gives you low recoil, but yet it's very easy to conceal, I think either the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 2.0 or the Ruger LCP Max are just going to be great choices. It's just for you to decide. And again, a big thank you to Smith & Wesson and to Ruger for making this video possible. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic. One of the things about the Ruger LCP, Smith & Wesson just released their Bodyguard. I love the Ruger LCP Max. Okay, did I say 2? Did I say 2? 2 great choices, but there are some differences. And the humidity down here is horrible. I can't hardly even see.